Good evening, everybody. Before I begin, my thanks to the organizers for giving me this opportunity and my salutations to my teachers, some of whom I see sitting here, Dr. Chandra, Dr. Seth, Dr. Sai, always tough acts to follow, but let's see if we can. I have the daunting task of trying to speak about bicuspid aortic valve over the next 10 minutes, something that would take an hour to even just speak, just start describing. Are the slides seen? Is the slide seen?
Yes.
Make it full screen, Ajay. You can make it full screen, I think.
On my screen, it is showing full screen. I wonder whether it is with you now still.
It's okay. You do carry on. I think
Okay.
it will be managed.
Yeah, this is the second slide.
Yes.
So TAVI in bicuspid aortic valve, this has been recognized as safe and effective treatment. But traditionally, in all the randomized clinical trials, bicuspid aortic valves have been excluded. In severe AS, they are still considered for bicuspid valves as off-label. There are higher rates of paravalvular leaks, permanent pacemaker implantations, and annulus ruptures compared to tricuspid valves. Now, I thought we'll look at this in three parts. Are all bicuspid valves the same? What's the experience with bicuspid valve and TAVI? And what are the considerations for a TAVI and bicuspid valve? First of all bicuspid valves are not the same.
Change, sir, for you people, because we are still see the only starting slide here.
Oh, correct. We're not. Yeah, that's better.
Yeah, now it is okay.
Is it still?
Yeah,
No,
now it's moved on.
It's moved.
Yeah.
Is it-
Sorry to interrupt. Kindly click on the slideshow button on the taskbar above. There's a play button.
Slideshow.
Right. Go to
Slideshow, is that right?
play from the current slide.
Is it seen now?
We are seeing your slides. They're just not full screen and they're not moving. But now they are.
Bottom left, below the normal view, left you have an icon. You click on that. Yeah, there.
Are they seen now? Or still we are not moving?
It's okay. It's
What I
okay.
do is I'll move with this.
Yeah.
Is it seen now?
Yeah.
So it may not be full screen, but I think it'll work.
Yes, it'll work.
So essentially,
Go ahead.
are all bicuspid valves the same? They're not. The classical bicuspid valve is one that has two cusps, and the common bicuspid valve is the one that has three cusps with a fused raphe. The Stevers type 1, the commonest type for those who are going to see it for the first time. This is what it looks like. One has a type 0 with just two cusps. The type 1, which is the commonest one, in which the right and the left coronary cusp fused with the raphe, is the commonest type, and the type 2, wherein there are two raphe fused, and they're by no means the same. A raphe is basically a groove that marks the line where tissue has fused in the embryo. And anatomically, this is important for TAVI operators because the raphe is lower than the opening commissures, and thus this makes the opening a little more eccentric, and it also makes the depth of implantation a little more challenging. On an average, the other differences are the annular dimensions are slightly larger in bicuspid valves. They're also severely calcified for equivalent valve orifice sizes. They're associated with the aortopathies with different types of aortic roots. Now, what do they look like on imaging? This is what a type 0 looks like with the CT image in diastole and systole. This is what a type 1 valve looks like. Now, it's important to see that there are multiple different types and degrees of fusions of raphe with different lengths of raphe. And this is an absolute spectrum. In addition to the fusion, they could be symmetric or asymmetric, with more symmetric cusps closer to the symmetry of a tricuspid valve, whereas the asymmetric cusp with the cusp opposing the raphe and the two opening commissures are aligned in a straight line were easier to distinguish. So they are so protean and so different that there is no way that one could use a single kind of anatomy or a single rule for all bicuspids. The change in the length of the raphe and the symmetry makes it extremely difficult to decide in a given case how the valve is going to behave inside this anatomy. This is what it looks like on CT. To add confusion, there is another entity called incomplete commissural opening, in which there's no raphe actually, but it's a tricuspid valve, which was initially associated with complete opening of all commissures, but later degenerative changes cause the leaflet restriction that prevents the commissure from opening properly, resembling a bicuspid anatomy. Now, this is sometimes referred to as functionally acquired bicuspid or tricommissurally bicuspid, but these terms are poorly defined. The important thing to remember is, as opposed to a raphe, the margins attain the same level as the opening commissure, and the symmetry is absolutely very well seen on the CT. So this is different from a bicuspid. It's not really a true bicuspid. People call it functionally bicuspid, but it is different because there is no raphe, and the ceiling skirt can actually come down a little bit down below. in when we actually look at it. This is what it looks like on a CT in diastole and systole. Thus, bicuspid valves show a very different anatomy. It's a complete spectrum. They're often asymmetric with unequal and eccentric openings, almost always more calcified for equivalent orifice areas, and they are often associated with aortopathies. Specific considerations for implanters is the positioning of the prosthesis. Where is the sealing going to occur? It's clear, one must have a clear idea of where the sealing skirt is going to be. The angulation of the annulus. Bicuspid patients can present with horizontal aortas as well, dilated roots and ascending aortas, large scallop shaped leaflets, and the usual rules of coronary ostia must be looked at again. Deep and variable sinus depths. The issue of delayed coronary obstruction has been spoken of, and calcification, whose distribution and severity are severely going to implant the way in which we implant the valves. Now, what about TAVI for patients with bicuspid aortic stenosis? Looking at bicuspid valves, the natural history is a little different from the tricuspid valves. Survival at 20 years is almost the same as general population. However, 25% of people with bicuspid valves require valve surgery over 20 years. The frequency of adverse events is stratified according to risk factors, age more than 30 years, etc. And bicuspid patients are typically 10 years younger at surgery than tricuspid valve patients, with important differences in clinical manifestations caused by occurrence of endocarditis and aortic regurgitation somewhere along the course of their natural history. TAVIs in bicuspid valves are only 10 years old. This is a sobering characteristic, and we must remember that it's just for the last 10 years that we've used them in various kinds of registries. Mylott et al. Published a series of valves in which this was very interesting because it is one of the few series in which he's tried to look at the different kinds of bicuspids and try to stratify the way in which these patients behave before and after, stratify them separately for their anatomies, and see what kind of results we get. In hospital and 30-day mortalities in all these registries wasn't very great initially as compared to the tricuspid valves. There were high rates of malpositions, there was need for a second TAVI device, and there was a lot of residual paravalvular regurgitation. And this led to, as late as 2014, the European Society saying that bicuspid valve was a relative contraindication for TAVI. However, with time, MDCT became the standard of care, and more information came about on the types of anatomies that we could use. And the newer generation devices with sealing skirts and the ability to position them more exactly, and more complex algorithms with operator experience and more registries. And this is what I call the second phase of the TAVI registries, in which they actually compared bicuspid and tricuspid and found that there weren't very many significant differences across observed in adverse procedural events with the newer generation valve especially. And in a large meta-analysis of more than 2,000 patients with 4 trials, similar mean pressure gradients with a tendency towards a higher incidence of post-procedural AR, slightly higher risk of AR, and no difference in 30-day and 1-year mortality between the two groups, as was shown in this meta-analysis. However, 2 more recent studies, the outcomes of the transcatheter aortic valve replacement with the balloon expandable and the self-expanding, we'll look at them one by one. This was reported last year, 92,236 SAPIEN 3 TAVRs in the registry, out of which there were 2,726 bicuspid valves. They were matched, propensity matched for similar patients in the tricuspid valve group. 25 covariates were used for propensity matching. They were not randomized. This is just a registry. And what did they find? They found that the mean gradients at baseline echo, the mean gradients were similar. Aortic valve areas were similar. Ejection fractions were similar. Annular size was significantly larger in the bicuspid group. MR and TR were similar. And procedural outcomes, the device success was similar. Procedure time was a little bit more. Fluoroscopy time was a little bit more. Conversion to open surgery was much higher. Annulus rupture was almost exclusively seen in the bicuspid aortic valve group, with higher incidence of need for a second valve, twice as frequently as in the tricuspid aortic valve group. In summary, the large balloon expandable SAPIEN 3 valve experience showed similar survival with a higher risk of aortic root injury and conversion to open heart surgery, although the overall rate was still small. Increased peri-procedural and 30-day stroke risks, but equivalent hemodynamics and similar improvement in quality of life for a very, very small increase in adverse events. This provided an argument for TAVR to be a reasonable alternative for bicuspid aortic valve in patients who are intermediate or high risk for surgical and aortic valve replacement. What about the self-expanding valves? TAVRs between 2015 and 18, in this registry, we've had 26,154 tricuspid valves versus 932 bicuspid valves. Again, they were matched for similar covariates. All-cause mortality at 30 days, 1 year, stroke at 30 days and 1 year. Pacemaker rates were similar, but re-intervention rates were a little higher. This was because of the higher incidence of aortic regurgitation, both at the initial implantation as well as at 30 days and even at 1 year, and a higher occurrence of severe AR in this group. And this is what is shown, similar survival curves, but a slightly higher incidence of aortic regurgitation in the bicuspid group as compared to the tricuspid group. Thus, TAVI in the bicuspid situation is extremely challenging because of the complex anatomy and the aortopathy. There's a major role for the CT scan, and available data comparing outcomes suggest that newer devices offer favorable results with lesser paravalvular leaks. There's limited long-term data, and there's almost no data in retrospective non-RCT design. All of it is registry-based. There's no durability data as well. In our experience of 35 cases, we have got 35 severe aortic stenosis with 6 female, 29 male. Most of them were self-expanding because of the way in which we procure the valves. 33 were successful. In one patient, we were unable to deliver the valve, which was heavily calcified with a large septal bulge. We had one mortality, one major complication. One valve pop-out, for which I'm going to show you. The valve was deployed, and one patient in whom the valve was snared and deployed in the CIA. This was a balloon expandable valve which actually came off the balloon. So we snared it, brought it down, deployed it in the CIA, and then covered it with a covered stent and put in a second valve successfully. We had almost no one minor vascular complication. 5 patients needed a pacemaker, and our gradients were fairly acceptable. I don't know if this can be seen on this, but you'll see that this was a patient similar to Dr. Sai's. What happened was we had a septal bulge. We have finished deploying the valve. And as to our horror, we watched it gradually get milked out by the septal bulge, and it came and got stuck. And that's what we did. We did what he did actually. We managed to put in a second valve and use the first valve skeleton to hold the second valve in place, and then did a post dilatation, and we got away with a fairly good 15 millimeter gradient, and which we accepted because of the calcium and the nature of the valve itself. We had 9 patients in our series of bicuspids. We were successful in all. In our practice, we predilate all. We had a mean gradient of 11.7. All are follow-up at stable at follow-up of 12 to 26 months. It's important to discuss which patient is not a candidate for TAVR.
One more minute, Swami. One more minute.
Right, sir. Very, very severe coronary artery disease, multivalvular disease, aortic pathology, unfavorable calcium, and low coronary ostia, we don't use. Current practice with respect to sizing, implantation, and calcium measurement is a work in progress. Casper has shown us the importance of the ratio of the raphe length and the annulus diameter, the calcium burden and the distribution, and gives us very, very good algorithms for sizing. Different approaches for sinulus size, ICD sizing, and supraannular tracing are there. This is the best what Bauer shows us with the tube, the flare, and the taper. The annular size still seems to be the best. This is what we do when we are in doubt. We do a balloon inflation and then look at what kind of size we need and decide on the size, identify the location, evaluate the sealing. This also helps us in case with high coronary obstruction because it kind of helps us to predict whether we're going to have a coronary obstruction or not. In common practice, we use the MDCT, the pre-dilatation, the implant depth, we aim for 3, post-dilate. It's safe and effective in the intermediate term. It's feasible and rewarding. Patient selection is important. Expertise at every step. Heart team approach is important. The remaining issues are optimal sizing techniques, precise device deployment, and long-term outcomes. And this is a tribute to the master, some of whom are watching, and the original Alain Tribia, who was the pioneer as far as this technique is concerned. Thank you very much. And
Thank you.
To answer anything.
Thank you, Swami. You've practically been very exhaustive and covered every aspect of it. Of course, this is if we go into discussions, it could be a very long discussion and never ending. I think in the interest of time, we should move on and have Nagendra Chauhan present his long-term durability of TAVR mechanisms and predictors and determinants. Nagendra, over to you.